what has coaching taught you about people in general?
That's a great question. I think sometimes because I'm surrounded by coaches. Everyone basically I interact with, 90% of the people I interact with on a daily basis are coach trained or in coach training classes. I took a webinar once, or a workshop, like an intensive workshop once, that was not coaching based. It was just business based. And I was shocked at how poor the listening skills were of the other people in my cohort. And it wasn't, it was the kind of thing where I had to really stop myself and question, is this really the state of people? Like, is this? And it wasn't, this wasn't, an inexpensive program. This was a pretty significant cross section of what was happening in the business world. And it made me realize that in the business world, there are different pockets as well of people who are extremely adept and advanced in their listening skills. And then there are pockets that aren't. So I think there's an important distinction to make when people, like, I don't know, I guess buy into empathy and buy into growth mindset and buy into a lot of these coaching concepts. That's not a given. That's a choice that people are making, consciously making. And anyone can make this choice, whether in business or in the education space or wellness space or whatever space. This is a conscious choice to incorporate these concepts into their lives. And so when someone does that, I think what in that moment I understood, that's not an inconsequential choice. That could be a monumental, that could be a milestone, or a choice that people say, you know what, I'm really going to actively spend time cultivating my empathetic listening. That's huge. I'm going to actively cultivate a growth mindset. That's amazing. I'm going to actively look at my character traits, my strengths, and see how can I further apply my strengths every day, every week in my life. These are really big choices. So when people make these choices, whole new fields of opportunity open up for them. Growth, yes. Some pain, yes. But that's part of it. It's part of the deal. And what I found is when people make that choice, when they start to move into those spaces, whole new opportunities open up for them. Whole new internal resources are available to people that are on that path. And when you're on that path yourself, it does feel hard. There can be stress, there can be anxiety, there can be all of this stuff. But I don't think that that the other path of not choosing it, I think there's the same stressors, the same anxieties, like levels, but there's no I don't know where the mechanism is to get out of it. So I spent that course in that space tizzied. I don't know what the best, like, how much do I, like, that's what I felt like in it, in the non-coaching world. In the coaching world, I feel like, yeah, like let's get down to business. Let's give each other useful feedback. Let's tap into that natural resourcefulness. And that's what I mean, having coached people for over a decade, listen to people are more resilient than they think they are, but that doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah, and sometimes it can be managing your own, I'm just talking from clients that I've spoken to, or even myself when I first started this journey, judgments or expectations or assumptions, and where you are in your own growth journey, it's not necessarily going to be the same for everybody around you. I mean, you're fairly blessed, aren't you, John? Your wife is a coach, growth mindset, you're surrounded by phenomenal coaches, they're in your world and they get where you're at and having those conversations. I think about when I'm working with organizations as well, and especially if you're doing a diversity program, and often, get asked a question of, well, this is all great, I'm working on myself, but what about those people over there? And, they're still going back into the same culture. So sometimes there can be frustration for people when I'm working with them, or they're working on themselves and their kids and their spouse or their family or people around them are not in the same space that they're in. What guidance or tips would you give people in that place?
There was something that Laura Whitworth said when I was in a leadership program. She was one of the co-founders of the ICF back in 1995. One of the main figures in the start of the coaching field. And we had it was a 4-week, four intensive weeks spread out over 10 months. And she had cancer, and she died between 3 and 4, retreat 3 and retreat 4. And we all knew, it was known, and it was sad, and she was powerful. And I felt very lucky to be in that space. She said after retreat 1, she didn't really like us. She says, as a group of people, we were horrible. And she wondered, and she worried about the state of humanity. And I can see why. And sometimes when I think of my own journey through this, all the mistakes I've made, the conceptions I had to let go of, and all of the ideas of how value was created and all of that, I realized there is an element of humility as well, that I realized, I don't want to be that person that's just sitting there thinking I want to separate the person from the skill set. And I feel like that's a really valuable thing. And something Laura would say is that, look, it's not that they don't want to, it's that they don't know how. And that sticks, and so you separate the person from the skill set, and you think, okay, they don't know how. It doesn't mean it's not my responsibility to teach them, but it is also not my responsibility to attach all of those negative feelings that I might feel to the person. I can attach it to the skill set. That's a useful distinction. And by retreat 2 and 3, she ended up liking us more and more, but I could feel it from her. She was fierce. She is one of my favorite people. But yeah, Laura Whitworth was a force of nature, and she did not hold back in her feedback to us, and we loved her for it.
Such a powerful message there. I have to remind myself of that regularly. It's not my job to fix others, because then I'm in a place of ego as well. I joke with friends sometimes. They all know I'm a coach, and we're hosting something and people are around, and I know I'm that person that's like a magnet that someone's going to come and sit next to and chat to, or there could be an outpouring of something. So I'll joke and say, I'm off duty. I'm off duty tonight. And it doesn't mean that I'm not being present or listening or holding space. But at the same time, it's not my responsibility. Everyone is on a journey themselves, aren't they? And everyone we meet is doing the best that they can from where they're at. Remembering that really helps me.
Yeah, and then I find that when I'm on my game, when I'm actively employing all of my energies towards a goal, the actions or non-actions or bias or whatever of other people, it doesn't affect me the same way. Like I don't get hooked in it. I still see it. I'm like, okay, it's there. It's not going to go away. But this is where having that empathetic motivation of this is what I want to create. Well, this is the mission. For me, it's what if every teacher were a trained life coach? Like that's it. Like it's simple. Like that's the idea. And how well am I doing that today? How well am I doing that this week? In this conversation with a neighbor, and I'm realizing, whoa, okay. Or, someone's throwing something out there. Does it serve for me to engage with that, or just see it, let it go? You know what I mean? That's a useful, that outcome is it's a useful tool for your mental emotional space.
Thanks, John. Okay, I'm gonna segue us to the next question, which I think connects beautifully. How can life coaching improve your personal relationships?
I think it's cool to ask questions and to be more curious. There was a participant in one of my 2.0s, and she said that her grandma would always tell the same stories over and over again every holiday season. And everyone would just sit there and listen, nod their heads, and then count another time. So this is maybe the 17th time she's told the story. This participant decided, you know what, I am going to go level 2. And I'm going to not just listen to this story, I'm going to listen actively, empathetically to her. And then I'm going to keep asking questions. And as they're sitting there in this, this table, grandma's telling her story, everyone's nodding, going through it. And then she starts asking questions. And everyone at the table is like, oh, what are you doing? Why? What? We just spent 3 minutes listening to this for the 17th time. Are you, what? Grandma starts telling more of the story. She starts going more and more into it. And, different things are coming up. And every, in the participant, she comes back and says, that was amazing. Her eyes lit up, her energy lit up. She said, I never would have known that. I never would have got there if I hadn't actively tried to listen, actively, empathetically level 2. And then, months later, because, 2.0 is a distance, it came up again. So is she telling the same stories? She's not. Grandma didn't repeat the story again. Grandma was heard. She was witnessed. She was seen as a human being telling a story that was important to her. And not just that, but someone was actively listening and trying to go even more into the story. That I feel like is coaching at its best. It helps you connect with somebody on a deep, meaningful level that changes not only, your relationship with them, but it helps grandma get to different parts of the story. It helps her remember different pieces of it and know that, yeah, someone's listening to me. They're not just nodding and saying, okay, how can I get out of this? They're actively connecting with me. That's priceless. And that is a skill that coaching offers.
And that makes me think about what I've learned about people in general when you're sharing that. I mean, ultimately, we all want the same thing, don't we? We want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to be acknowledged. And the more I work with people, I see that we're actually more alike than we are different. We have the same fears. And think about execs that I work with, and sometimes I get the question of, well, what's different for you when you're working with men than women? And actually the same kinds of things and themes come up with inner critic and inner dialogue and imposter syndrome and all of those things. And how many times at the end of even a coaching session, one of the takeaways, a person's like, it was so good for me to just express that or to be heard, someone holding the space for them. I'm just thinking about coaching skills for me. I mean, it's literally changed my life, not just having had coaching myself or coaching others. But I think about how much more patient I am, how much more I do listen. If I think about being present for my spouse, I mean, I ask him a question at the beginning of the day, what do you need from me today, honey? And just holding that space and being curious. It really enhanced my ability to be empathetic. But I think more importantly than anything was perspectives, being able to not just be in my own perspective with somebody else, for me to really think about, well, what might be going on for the other person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Here's a fun game to play or design to do sometimes. is, it's the closest people in your life. When you say I love you and they say I love you too, it's pretty standard. But what happens when you design, instead of saying I love you too, I'm going to say why. I'm going to ask a question, why or what? Why? It's so silly. It's so silly because it's like, well, why? And then the other person, you're not like a mean, like, tell me why or give me something to make myself feel better. But it's amazing when you just try for a day. Try for a day and see what happens. It's, you have to design it, and it's not like, I'm asking why not to be egotistical or, build myself up or whatever. But it's just a lovely, just, try it for a day, see what happens. It's a lovely exercise. But it's that kind of curiosity. It's that kind of curiosity that helps you get deeper and more specific. And that's what coaching does. It's not like it's this magical profession that when you do it, you become like a superhuman. It helps you. It just boosts your listening skills maybe 30%. And then it helps you have structures so that when something comes up, you have a tool set or structure to deal with it, I think more quickly and efficiently. Moise and I had a friend in Portland who was not coach trained, but just naturally listened empathetically. And she was a magnet. She was like a friend magnet. You could just see it happen. And it was just remarkable to see her work. Like it was a wow every time. And some people naturally do this. You probably, everyone has friends like this who are not formally trained, but maybe their parents did, or they just learned it, or they just do it naturally. I think that's amazing. Yeah, I really do. So yeah, I think it's that listening and curiosity, and it takes someone to be secure in yourself, to know, yeah, this is what I'm born to do. And when you have that clarity of outcome that you're trying to accomplish, not for your sake, but for the sake of others, it all starts to click. You can orient all of your decisions around that. And the security you feel in your own personhood, it's comforting. That makes sense.